What is going on, everyone? My name is Pete Snacks, and I'm here to talk to you about something very near and dear to my heart, and that is 808s. More specifically, I'm going to show you how I make 808s from scratch inside of Ableton Live using nothing but stock plugins. If all goes to plan, we'll end up with something on par or better than anything you can get on Splice or any other sample pack. Now, I'm going to be using Ableton stock plugins, but the basic principles apply in any other DAW or any set of plugins, so use whatever you're comfortable with to follow along. In the most basic sense, an 808 is generally a low tone, often with some sort of pitch envelope at the beginning to give it a punchy attack. From there, it's usually distorted and compressed to make it as loud as possible and also to give it some upper harmonic content. I think a lot of people, myself included, when they first start making their own 808s, they underestimate how loud the sound really needs to be. You want to make the sound as loud as you possibly can without making it sound bad. And since we're using a lot of saturation and distortion, it can get really, really loud. The idea is you want to be able to hear your sound in a list of 808s you get from professional sample packs and have yours fit in or stand out as being better. And you can always turn the sound down in a mix, so you want to make the individual sound as loud as possible. When I approach making my own 808s, I like to start with analyzing an already made sample that I know sounds really good. Then I'll deconstruct that sound and use it as a guide toward my end result. I'll take a look at the sample through a spectrum analyzer to see what the frequencies are doing, and I'll also check the loudness on a loudness meter so I know a physical number of what I should shoot for in the end result. So let's do that. Let's take an already made 808 and analyze what's going on. I'm going to use this Super Mario Super Juice 808 from Splice on the Super Mario Essentials kit. And it's an 808 that I use a lot and I've heard of on a lot of different sound systems, so I know it sounds really good. Let's take a listen. So it's got an initial transient and it's pretty distorted. So let's take a look at the sample through a frequency analyzer. I'm just going to use the built-in one in Ableton's EQ8. You can double click on that to make it full screen. So as you can see, it's got a big fundamental frequency down here at around C0. And then it's got some additional harmonics around 100 hertz and a little bit more in the lower mids and not much going on over 1K. So now I want to see how loud this sound is. To do that, you can use any RMS or peak meter. I'm going to use the one built into Isotope's maximizer. You can use anything you want. So the peak here is going up to 0, which is good. That means it's not going to be digital clipping because anything over 0 is going to be digital clipping. And our RMS, which is the perceived loudness of the sound, is hitting at negative 2.4 dB, which is pretty loud, but honestly, I think we can do a little bit better. Next, we have to decide what we want to use to make our 808s. Since an 808 is essentially just a pitch envelope on a low sine wave, just about any synth can make that sound, so it's really up to you what you want to use. Just experiment with what you have and find out what works best for you. I really enjoy using Ableton's operator for 808s because it's really easy to get a low tone, and it's got a few tricks up its sleeve that make 808s super powerful. Operator is a 4 oscillator FM synth, but I'm only going to use one oscillator, and it's automatically set to a sine wave, so that's good. The first thing I'm going to do, since we want this really loud, is bring this level of oscillator A all the way up to 0. I'm playing in the C0 octave, so there what we have is just a really low sine wave, which is great. Next, I'm going to add an Ableton glue compressor because this has a soft clip function, which I have set on by default, which you can do to any Ableton plugin by right-clicking, click Save as Default Preset. This is going to store the current settings of the plugin, and that's what's going to load up anytime you bring in that plugin. Now, this soft clipping mode acts as kind of an analog distortion so that nothing goes over the threshold, which I think is like negative 0.5 dB. So we can listen to that. We've already got some additional saturation going on. I'm going to add a little bit more with the saturator. This also has a soft clip function, which I have set on by default. And And we can listen to that, and we've got even more pretty subtle saturation, but it adds some good upper harmonics to our sound. One of the strengths that Operator has is in this oscillator tab. If you click on that, you have access to a sort of additive synthesis type engine. What that means is each of these individual bands, it represents a harmonic that we can add to add some complexity to our sound. These here are different resolutions, and I'm going to set that to 16 because we only want to add a few big ones. Our original sample had a pretty big upper harmonic around 100, which corresponds to this third one here. So really we could just add some until it sounds good. So that adds some harmonics. So I'm gonna, you can mess around with this and see what sounds good for you. For this, and for most of my 808s, I usually just deal with these first four here. That gives some good texture to any low end. The next thing we need to do is add a pitch envelope. Operator also makes that really easy. All we have to do is click on that button to activate it and add this amount here. I'm just gonna go full 100. By default, it's got this curve here. So it's going up to 12 steps or 1 octave and then going down to 0 over 600 milliseconds. I want this to go up to 24, so it goes up 2 octaves. And that's a little too slow. I want that to be more punchy, so it kind of sounds like a kick is layered in there. Right in there, 267 sounds pretty good. Something I sometimes like to do as well is add a little bit of pitch attack. Find that kind of softens it. Instead of it being so clicky, it's more, I don't really know, more just punchy, I guess. Yeah, so that sounds good to me. The next thing we can do is we can EQ this a little bit. I want to get a little bit more low end, because when you change the EQ going into these saturation devices, it can have a really big impact on your sound. So if we just turn on that first band, it's automatically set to a cut for the way I have EQ set up. That already changes it, but that's not what I'm after. I want to boost the low end a little bit. So we'll make it a shelf. We'll just make that a little bit ridiculous. We're clipping a lot coming out of this. That's okay, I think, because we're going into this good saturation from the glue and the saturator. And yeah, we're just trying to shape our sound until we get something we like. This is all experimentation. We're just trying to kind of massage the sound that's going into these saturations to get what we're looking for. And again, I just experiment with this. I just try and tweak parameters to see what works. Since we're kind of operating at extreme volumes and levels of saturation, very small changes will have a drastic impact on the sound. So I'm not gonna mess with these saturations yet. What I'm gonna do next is render this down to audio. I like to have it in audio because I find it's easier to work when we're shaping the volume, because I don't like to use the envelopes in the synth to shape the volume, because you get a lot more control if you do that when it's in audio. So to do that, I'm just going to add a MIDI clip. We'll make it longer than we really need. Hit Control-Shift-M on a Windows to add a MIDI clip. I'm gonna go to C0, add that in, hit legato. So now we just have one really long MIDI clip. And then I want to render this down to audio. Easiest way is to freeze track. And then we're going to insert another audio track and just drag that down. And I like to save the original audio channel just in case we mess up real bad and need to kind of start over. So let's solo that. Obviously, we know what we have. We know what we're doing. So these are the things that come up on my default audio track: an EQ, glue compressor, and saturator. I'm going to turn this low cut off. And then I'm just going to saturate this. By increasing the makeup gain, you drive more of the sound into the soft clipper. So you get more of a distorted sound, obviously. So that sounded pretty good. I still want a little bit more low end. So I'm actually going to boost the low end again. This might be kind of crazy. Alright, so we just need to do that a little bit. And actually, yeah, we're gonna boost at around 100 instead of cut. That sounds good to me. We're getting extreme, but that's all right. 808s can get pretty extreme. Next, we can mess with this saturator a little bit. That can get pretty crazy. I don't think I want to go that crazy for this sound right now. And then, so the drive obviously controls the drive into the saturator. And then the bass, I think, kind of controls more of the upper saturation. I'm not entirely sure. I should probably look into that. But yeah, that's a good knob to mess around with to get some unique sounds. Obviously, we can make it pretty extreme. We don't want that. It's pretty subtle. Gives us some good sound. Again, I'm just messing with the other parameters that I've tweaked just to see if any minor changes improve the sound at all. I like where this is going, but it's maybe a little too bright. So I'm going to add an auto filter. So maybe put that before the saturator. Yeah, that sounded pretty good to me. I don't think we're going to get exactly the same sound as the Super Mario 808, but we're just using that as a reference for our end result. So that sounded pretty good to me. All right, so now let's see where we're at with our RMS. So I'm going to get the isotope maximizer again. Bring this threshold up so it's not doing anything. Okay. So our sample is at -2 on the peak. And that is because the glue compressor and the saturator have some internal limiting. So they don't let things go past a certain frequency. But our RMS is at 0, essentially. Yeah, is at 0. So that's really, really loud. That's already louder than our previous sample. So I want this peak to be at 0. I want that to be just as loud as possible. So I'm going to get the limiter from Ableton. Pretty simple. And we need to boost that up by 2.2 dB because that's how far below we were. And then I want the ceiling to be 0. So let's check that out again. Yeah. And that also cranked up our RMS, which is now at 2.2, which is crazy loud. So I think we did a good job. You may also notice the meter over here is going into the red, and that is okay in this case because our peak is at 0 still, so we're not going to enter into digital clipping at all, but our RMS is at +2, so that's what's indicating the red. So don't worry, it's okay. Again, I said we want this to be very, very loud, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. I am going to render this down to audio again because if we make the fades right now, the change in volume is going to impact the saturators and everything that we've got going on. So it's going to sound, it might sound good, but it's going to be kind of unpredictable. So let's see what happens when we do that. See how the tail there kind of sounds weird. In this case, I don't really like that, but sometimes it can be good. So I'm going to make this long, and then I'm going to freeze that track, and then I'm just going to flatten it because we've got our starting point and I just want to keep it going, you know. So flatten that. Now we have our audio track with nothing on it. As you can see, this is just like a wall of bass. So now I want to emulate the envelope of this sound. So let's make that a little shorter and then use the clip fades in Ableton to just kind of get a rough shape. Yeah. So then we can bring this in a little bit because it looks like there's a little bit of a attack there. Yeah. Now we can obviously go further. We can do other distortion if we want. Just the rules are there are no rules. And since you're just doing this at home, nobody else is going to hear this, so you can try out whatever you want. And you know, if it sounds bad, just delete it. So to finish this up, I'm going to render this. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-R. That is going to bring up our export settings. I am going to, obviously I don't want it to be MP3. I want it to be a WAV file, 24-bit, no dither. And then, since we didn't do any stereo effects or anything like that, I'm going to hit this Convert to Mono. So that way, it's going to just be a single mono source, and then when we drag it in, it'll be for sure straight down the middle. So I'm going to export that. I've already made a bunch of 808s that I'm going to be putting out in a kit here shortly. We will call this one Tutorial 808. Now, the other important thing is to label the key. So that way when you bring this into another beat, or if you give it to somebody or anything, you can always know what key it is in. And we were in C. It's very important to label the key of your 808s. So I'm just going to hit save, and that saved it just like that. So now if I navigate to my sample library, the Pete Snacks samples, subs, I've got all mine here, but the Tutorial 808 right there. And then we can drag that in, and you'll see that it is a mono sample. Cool. All right, I think we made a pretty good 808. Obviously, we can get better. We can always get better, but it's a good way to make an 808 that is of the caliber of any 808 that you would find in any other sample pack, but you made it yourself, so it's completely original. Nobody else has this sound. That's all you. And then, you know, if you want, you can post it on Reddit r/drumkits, get a lot of karma. Which, by the way, if you made it this far, go to Reddit/drumkits and download my 808 packs. They're pretty good. But yeah, this about does it for this video. Thank you for watching. Hope you followed along this far. I had a good time. I hope you did too. You know, the normal YouTube sound off. Smash that subscribe button. I'm going to be trying to upload some more Ableton-centric videos in the coming days, so keep an eye out for that. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.